Save Lebanon before it's too late. These were the words of Lebanon's interim Prime Minister, Hassan Diab, and he said it in his official speech 7 inches June 2021. At that time, he was warning of the severe economic crisis that Lebanon was going through. Come with us to make sure the news is true and to understand what is happening in Lebanon. Unfortunately, the state is bankrupt, and so is the Banque du Liban. We have problems. We must do our best to compensate depositors. The loss has occurred, I am sorry to say, because the policies over decades have brought us to this moment. What the Lebanese government is currently seeking is only to distribute losses to the concerned authorities, namely the state, the Banque du Liban, and depositors. This is what Lebanese Deputy Government Saadi al-Shami said in an interview with one of the Lebanese channels on Sunday, April 3. These words caused a sensation in all economic and political circles in the Arab world. The question now is it too late to save Lebanon? Especially with the news of Lebanon's bankruptcy that has spread on social media since the beginning of this month, making the Lebanese crisis at the forefront of global news bulletins. News headlines appeared everywhere. Lebanon declares bankruptcy. The collapse of the Lebanese economy. And as we know, addresses like these can bring down entire nations and cause a crisis among people, even if there was no crisis in the first place. Because all Lebanese depositors who save their money and deposits in Lebanese banks fear losing their deposits and the possibility of banks confiscating their money. Some or most of the depositors tend to withdraw their savings, lack liquidity, and stop the production cycle, which will eventually lead to a real crisis. The question that arises now is Lebanon bankrupt? What all journalists and local and international news sites overlook is this: whether unintentionally or deliberately, declaring the bankruptcy of a government, a central bank, an institution, or even a company is not based on a mere political statement of any official whatsoever. Because political statements can have motives and special purposes. Because a few hours after the declarations about the bankruptcy of Lebanon, the governor of the Banque du Liban, Riyad Salameh, issued an official statement in which he said, "What has been circulated regarding the bankruptcy of the central bank is incorrect, and that the Banque du Liban is carrying out the tasks entrusted to it." And after that, al-Shami, the same person who declared Lebanon bankrupt, is the one who denied the statement. He said that his sayings are fragmented, and he exaggerated his words to the point where he ended his talk and said, "Who am I to declare the state bankrupt?" Note that we reviewed the hadith that caused all this uproar. I found them all talking about the difficult economic situation and that the institutions and citizens do not appreciate the seriousness of the current situation in the country. By focusing more on the data of the Banque du Liban, we found that it was answering a question: what is the percentage that depositors in banks will bear? The response was that there is no specific percentage and that the state's capabilities are limited, and that I unfortunately heard many rumors saying that the state is bankrupt. This is how the creators made the story, by taking the last two words completely out of context and making their news. This is the fact that the news spread, regardless of its impact on a country suffering from a crisis of accumulation. But does this mean that Lebanon is not bankrupt and the economic situation is good? I will answer no. But I will give the viewer some details so that the viewer understands what is happening and how it is happening. Let me first explain to you what it means to bankrupt the state in the first place. First, there is no such thing as bankrupting a state in the first place. Because the state is not a company or an individual who declares bankruptcy. Whoever declared bankruptcy is the government that runs the state, and this means that the government has become unable to pay its financial obligations and debts. What is the state of bankruptcy? Bankruptcy is a legal status declared by the competent courts. That is, if a company or individuals defaulted on their debts. They could not come to a solution with the creditors, such as scheduling bad debts. Or, the profits entering the enterprise are much less than the expenses, and there are no assets owned by the corporation or by an individual that he can sell to cover debts and losses. In these cases, the courts find no alternative but to declare the troubled company, individual, or corporation bankrupt. But the proceedings do not end there, but the court is taking additional steps. The individual appoints a trustee for the bankrupt company or institution so that he can facilitate the business until the creditors get their money back. If this solution does not work, a more stringent measure is taken, which is to liquidate the company's assets and property and sell them at auction until its debts are paid. As we can see, These legal procedures cannot be applied to a country. No authority whatsoever can confiscate the assets owned by any state under any item whatever and sell them in a public auction, according to international law, because states are considered sovereign and may not be attacked, otherwise, it will be called war. The meaning of this speech is that there is no case called bankruptcy of a state. But there is a condition called default, and this situation occurs when the government is unable to pay the debt installments and the interest arising therefrom. This case has completely different procedures than what happens in the case of bankruptcy of a company, organization, or individual, and we will explain this in a separate episode. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.